Good day to our viewers and listeners. Welcome to another exciting episode of the with Sihle Tuta, our commercial director at Exness for South Africa, and myself, senior financial market strategist at Exness. So thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for your positive comments, for your feedback. Thank you for engaging with us, your likes. Please continue to subscribe, spread the word, and get others onto these episodes, as we hope that you gain a lot of value and insights into the industry, into your own trading activities and business in a very positive way. That's what our hope is from this series with Sihle and myself. And today we're going to be talking about global events' effects on financial markets. You know, generally, what effects do global events have on financial markets? Secondly, what 2025 global events are likely to have effects on financial markets? And Sihle, how are you doing, mate?
I'm good on yourself, Terence. How are things going?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good.
Yeah, what is the impact of global events on financial markets? Whew. I think the one that comes to mind for me is COVID,
Right.
right? Which was a major global
Major.
pandemic,
Major.
right?
Yeah.
We can't just call it an event.
Nothing like
Yeah.
that seen in our lives.
Yeah,
In our lifetime.
yeah. There was definitely, a pandemic which affected, the entire world.
Yeah.
But I think we need to know and ask
Mm.
what impact do events like that
Mm.
have on financial markets.
Yeah.
So, from your recollection, with the whole experience with COVID-19 and that entire experience,
Mm.
what would you say the impact was on financial markets?
Wow, man. I think COVID changed the trajectory of things.
Mm.
You know, that was such a significant moment in our lives. The way things were going, that moment was so significant that it actually changed the trajectory. I mean, that's a significant thing in life. If we look up, if we think about global events, that changed the trajectory of the entire globe because no one was left out in COVID. You know, it swept everywhere, from the highest of offices to, places never known or remote places never spoken or barely spoken about, where human beings are there. COVID went everywhere. I'm yet to find out if there isn't a place where it didn't reach. The effects were different.
Yeah.
What we're not talking about here is the reach, but the effects were now vastly different. Some places it's as if it never existed.
Yeah.
And in those places where it seems to never existed, if financial markets are an activity, their outlook would have been different.
I think the places where it looks like COVID never had an effect or an impact, I think that was as a result of the response of their governments to the pandemic.
Right.
Because the pandemic really hit most countries or most communities and societies more or less the same way, right? In terms of casualties and in terms of, whatever the outcome was. But the response of those governments to the pandemic,
Right.
really show. So the reason why things are today
Yes.
is as a result of how the government of that country responded to the pandemic. Some governments chose to be very proactive. Well, you can't have been 100% proactive because something like that happens without you expecting. But you have to be proactive in your response and how you manage it, right? Some countries were reactive. They wanted to see what someone else was doing, and they just took a very slow response sort of towards everything.
Right.
So the countries that were very proactive in managing the whole situation are far better off now in terms of, administering vaccines and making sure that their healthcare system is on point, making sure that all the facilities are there, making sure that all the healthcare practitioners and the professionals have all the tools they need to react and manage the situation, if you know what I mean. So I think that's my view.
Yeah, yeah,
Some
yeah,
countries really
yeah,
manage it much, much better.
yeah.
Especially, I mean, I remember in China, as an example, the way they were able to build pop-up hospitals and have beds in and have medical professionals to tend to people who are affected was almost instant. Whereas in some countries, I mean, it might take really longer to make all those temporary structures to make sure that, you know, beds are in there, people are there to receive medical services. So I think the whole response
Yeah.
by the government of that country really determines, you know, how well they manage it and obviously where they are now for us to say it looks like there was no COVID there. But
Yeah.
also what I remember is at the time I used to be part of another broker, and I remember I wouldn't say panic, but there was a fear that the whole pandemic came with in the community,
Right.
right? People were spending a lot of time online, right? Because their livelihoods was threatened. People's jobs were threatened. A lot of companies closed down, right? Which obviously had an impact on the economy. The more and more companies close down, especially in the small to medium business sector, it's not good for any economy. So a lot of people were busy searching online for alternatives, right? What do I do if I lose my job? What do I do if my company closes down? And because online trading, is one of the fastest growing industries
Definitely.
in South Africa, in Africa, in SSA, in Nigeria, in Kenya, right? It was a hit. I remember at the time, I think it was around June, July 2020, if I'm not mistaken. With the particular broker I was with, we had more registrations
Yeah.
in that 1 month in history.
Wow. In a
Because-
month.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People were online, people were searching, you know, about online trading and, you know, how to make extra money there and there. And obviously, it's expected that the more registrations, then the conversion is going to be better, which means there was a lot of capital injection
Wow.
into the whole trading or CFD ecosystem, right? And I think for me, that's a very big takeaway. The fear or the panic that it caused people to sort of look for alternatives or look for a side gig, some people like to call it. So I think that that's one thing that really stands out for me.
Wow. And it's interesting you say that, because in that time also, what is also a direct correlation to that, time, and in particular trading, that's when the instruments begin spiking.
Yeah.
That's when the values, not necessarily just June or July alone, but beginning when I think about February, March, when countries started going into lockdown, such as South Africa,
Yeah.
when such drastic moves began being implemented, curfews, and the scramble for vaccine, for a solution. And at that time, then we started seeing also all-time highs being reached, in particular in for example, Bitcoin shot up, gold shot up. So you could see that liquidity was moving from a certain place,
Yeah.
a certain market, and inflows, and it was being directed that direction. So also that event
Yeah.
became positive for certain instruments and for certain markets and for certain businesses. That became a very good wave for brokers, for fintech providers. I mean, various fintech companies over the past 5-6 years have done exceedingly well because of their ability to offer and offering on cloud services, online, being able for businesses and enterprises to enterprise online. That's and we saw those equities of such companies doing very well as well, right? So they were able to quickly adapt to the times. But what is interesting is they were already positioned for the times. The use was never as vast as it became.
Yes.
Because of the need. So the need from the global event of that pandemic, of the COVID-19 pandemic, then, drove the need for these services and those companies, their values shot up. I mean, we talk about Zoom. Zoom became a household name.
Yes.
Google Meet also became quite used.
Yes.
Teams,
Skype.
Skype was forgotten. It
Yeah.
had been forgotten.
Yeah.
People had moved on to other communication methods. But all of that, became necessary. It was much needed, and those companies did exceedingly well. So that wave also came with that positive impact for those, and some healthcare companies. Some healthcare companies that were, well positioned, managed to roll out solutions quicker and reach solutions quicker, and they became part of the solution. So they also benefited quite considerably from this event. So
Yeah.
events have both the
Negative and positive impact.
negative and positive
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
But it depends on which side of that you choose to be on, maybe, if it's a choice,
Well, look,
or you find yourself to be in, or if you can move to another trade that makes more sense.
Well, I suppose there's always going to be gainers and losers on each side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the COVID-19, right, on the pharmaceutical health side, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer that industry sort of benefited from that pandemic.
Yeah.
But also on the other side of the spectrum, it really wasn't that good for the society as a whole.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you, though, so that's just one event, right, which had an impact on financial markets, which unfortunately was a pandemic. What other events can you recollect that you know have a global impact on financial markets? I mean, I know the one that comes to mind is obviously the U.S. election, right, or the outcome of the U.S. election, because if you have 2 or 3 candidates, right, the winning of one candidate over the other will sway the market in a specific direction, right? So what sort of other events can you recollect that really have a
tremendous
impact on the global markets?
I think post-COVID, the one significant event that happened at a time where I think the world started feeling, wow, we actually getting out of this pandemic. Especially at a time it felt that COVID seemed like it would never go away and it will keep on being chaotic. It will become more chaotic. I mean, it was exceedingly chaotic, but even worse, if we look at the amount of deaths and all the lingering health effects that have come from that as well. Significant losses, immeasurable, would say, during that time, right? So you're coming out of that event, and then you're coming into an event, a geopolitical event, that at one moment seemed as if it would be contained in Eastern Europe, right? But this actually affected the entire globe and also gave rise to inflation. Runaway inflation was also as a result of the geopolitical tensions, and deadlock in Eastern Europe between Ukraine and Russia. That's been a very significant moment and event, in sequence from the COVID pandemic to that level of geopolitical, deadlock and risk that has been experienced, because it's still lingering, right? And that had a lot of effect. And the immediate one, as I mentioned, was inflation. Because of inflation, because we already came from an environment that was a lockdown, right? And naturally, as people got around more they became more confident to get around more, that drove demand significantly. So there was that inflation push coming from COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next significant inflation push was the impact on energy, global energy. And it didn't stop at energy. It even went down to food, to foodstuffs, to fertilizer, because maybe not known to others
Yeah.
and well known to others is that those two countries are a significant global player when it comes to products such as maize, wheat, fertilizers, energy. If we just look at these four factors, these are your biggest
Yeah.
inflation drivers. These four, factors, and all of them were significantly and adversely affected during this time. So that also gave another significant inflation push. And shortages at some point, fertilizers became very difficult to
Yeah.
is the readily
Yeah.
available quantities that they were. Eventually, the bottlenecks were resolved and alternatives were established. But at that time, at that initial impact of the event, we talk about wheat and beyond wheat,
Yeah.
that'll go into bread, that'll go into cereals. So the chain goes on. The chain reaction really multiplies as you go on. Economies, certain trade partners, right, that Russia is a significant partner, were affected because of the sanctions that then came. Significant individual wealthy individuals were affected because of the sanctions. Global businesses were affected because the financial system was
Okay.
affected. So the level of impact was significant. That's why you saw that significant shock
Yeah.
in the market. And that was captured in the shoot up at that moment that Russia is moving in the price of gold. That
Okay.
headline,
Yeah.
that moment, it was a build-up,
Mm.
but the moment was captured in that sharp spike in the price of gold.
Yeah. So there's a saying that when two bulls are involved in a fight,
Yes,
then it's a grass that suffers.
yes.
And so my question is, what is the impact of conflict between two major economies
Yeah,
or two major countries?
yeah,
Not necessarily from a political point of view, because I don't want to really get into the politics.
yes.
I just want to unpack the impact
yes,
of a conflict
yes.
between two major countries
Yeah.
on the financial markets.
So that to that point, right? Again, to your point, where you leave the politics aside,
Yeah.
what we're looking at is the financial markets. What's happening there? You need to understand what's happening there so that you can gauge the effect
Yeah.
that it has on the financial market, so that you get the trade right. Which there's always a trade. Are you on the winning side of the trade, or are you on the losing side of the trade?
Yeah.
So if you're able to establish these factors with reasonable effort and capture the levels and the trajectory to which the effect could go. I mean, you can never know exactly how far it goes, but to some reasonable extent that you're able to forecast that. And after that, it's you stay in the trade for as long as the factors remain relevant. Some might still be in that trade right now.
Yeah.
Because the trade is in through different instrument. And I think from that, Sitley, when we talk about global events,
Yeah.
it's always important to bucket them in terms of which umbrella do they fall under. Global risk, geopolitical risk, financial market risk, contingent effect. What are the different types of umbrellas are these? Is this global event falling under? Then from there you unpack the different moving variables, right? To establish the trade. Say, okay, there's a trade here. We've heard about the Trump trade. That moment has also brought a trade. To the COVID-19 pandemic, that also brought a trade. So as a financial market practitioner, what you need to to establish as a trader,
Mm.
right? Because you are practicing, a form of financial services activity, right? And from that trading activity, what you then need to establish is what trade is this event presenting? There's always some kind of trade.
So would you say then, or would you compartmentalize, yeah, this word really, would you
Yeah.
really classify,
Yeah.
um, this under fundamental or sentimental trading?
So it's got both.
Yeah.
You need to get to the fundamentals.
Mhm.
And the fundamentals is what that means is get to the reasons.
Yeah.
Understand the reasons.
And therefore try
That's
to,
what fundamental analysis is.
yeah.
Sentiment is as well understand why the sentiment is there, why the mood is there. And these two, especially when they are strongly correlated, that makes an opportunity for a good trade.
Yeah.
If they are misaligned, it will tell you that the fundamentals and the sentiment is misaligned. So that's an arbitrage opportunity. They are going to realign at some point.
Yeah.
So again, that's a trade opportunity.
Yeah. And I think depending on your style as a trader,
Yes.
you may really want to sort of dig deeper
Yes.
and study the global events and
Yeah.
the impact they could potentially have
Yeah. Yeah.
on the financial markets, because that's definitely going to affect
Yeah, definitely.
your outcome and your
Yes.
trading activity. But I don't think we can ever have enough time
Yeah.
to discuss this one.
No, yeah.
But I think thank you, Terence, for sharing your insight, and to all of our viewers at home across the country, across SSA, please just support the channel by subscribing and liking and making a comment in the comment section. Let us know your thoughts and maybe even ask questions, and we'll try by all means to make a response. And if you're really keen to know what Xness is about, you can visit our website at xness.com. You can follow us on socials. We are on TikTok, we are on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and we're on Facebook if you really want to read more on what we are about. Thank you for your time, and until the next episode, it's cheers for now.
Bye.